Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the stories. The North Atlantic is a hungry beast. She'll take you in a blink, chew you up, and spit out your bones if she's in the mood. Most of the time, she just swallows you whole without a trace. I've seen it happen, not often, thankfully, but enough to etch the fear of her depths into my marrow. My name is Alex Reed, but everyone on the USCGC Relentless calls me Sonar. Not because I'm good with acoustics, but because I'm a rescue swimmer, and they say I can find anything in the water. Most days it's just debris, a lost fisherman, or a buoy that's drifted off course. Never anything like this. It was a Tuesday, the kind of Tuesday that feels like a Monday dragged out through a week of Sundays. Gray, choppy, the kind of sky that promises sleet and delivers misery. We were 3 days out from Kodiak, running routine patrol when the call came in. Not a mayday, not a satellite beacon, but an old-school, manual distress signal. The kind of thing that makes the hairs on your arm stand up because it shouldn't exist anymore. The frequency was ancient, barely cutting through the static. Lieutenant Miller, our co, looked like he'd just seen a ghost. "Run those coordinates again, Petty Officer Miller," he barked at the comms tech, his voice tight. "There's gotta be a mistake." The tech, a fresh-faced kid named Jensen, swallowed hard. "No mistake, sir, quadruple checked. The signal's originating here." He pointed to a spot on the chart far northeast, beyond the usual shipping lanes, in an area known more for its legends than its traffic. A cold, empty stretch of ocean. Miller rubbed a hand over his tired face. That's where the SS Adeline went down, and the Mary Celeste II, and the Orion." His voice dropped to a near whisper, naming ships lost to the sea decades ago, some of them before I was even born. "Shipwrecks, all of them, no survivors ever found." A shiver went down my spine despite the ship's warmth. "Sir," I spoke up, "a distress signal from a wreck. Is it some kind of ghost frequency?" Miller shot me a look. "Ghost or not, Sonar, someone's pushing a button, and our job is to investigate." He turned to the helmsman, set a course, full steam ahead. The journey to the coordinates felt longer than it should have. The sea churned, a bruised purple under the leaden sky. The Relentless cut through the waves, pitching and rolling, each groan of her hull a lament. The air grew colder, the wind more mournful. We were venturing into waters known for their cruelty, their secrets. Hours later, the radar picked up something. Not a ship, not a clear debris field, but a cluster of faint returns, shifting, ephemeral, like phantom echoes. Then through the driving rain and mist, we saw it. It wasn't one lifeboat, it was three. 3 lifeboats, bobbing precariously in the vast expanse, each one an archaic design, wood-hulled, painted in faded blues and grays that once might have been bright. And in them figures, dozens of them too many. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't right, this wasn't possible. "Sonar, prepare for deployment." Miller's voice cut through my stunned thoughts. "Hello, crew, prep for launch." "We're doing a hoist." I geared up, the heavy dry suit and harness feeling like a lead shroud. My mind raced, trying to grasp what we were seeing. Had some cult set up a reenactment? Were these actors? But the distress signal, the age of it. The helicopter thundered into the sky, buffeted by the wind. Below us, the lifeboats looked even more spectral. As we descended, the rotor wash whipped the ocean into a frenzy, revealing more of the impossible scene. Barnacles, thick and ancient, clung to the sides of the lifeboats. Their ropes were frayed, their paint peeling away in sheets like decaying skin. And the people, as I was lowered, my feet hit the water with a splash. The cold seized me even through the dry suit. I kicked towards the nearest lifeboat, my eyes scanning the faces. They were still, too still. "U.S. Coast Guard," I yelled, my voice barely audible over the wind and rotors. "Are you injured?" "Can you hear me?" One of the figures slowly turned its head. A woman. Her face was pale, almost translucent, her eyes wide and unblinking, fixed on me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Not fear, not relief. Something vacant. Her hair, a tangled mess of what looked like faded red, was plastered to her forehead. Her clothes were heavy wool, soaked but somehow not ruined. They looked like they'd been worn yesterday, and also for 100 years. We require assistance," she whispered, her voice a dry rasp, barely audible. "The Adeline, she went down. The Adeline. She sank in 1947, 76 years ago. A wave of nausea hit me. I forced it down. My training kicked in, rescue first, questions later. I moved to help her, reaching for her arm. Her skin felt like cold parchment, dry despite being drenched in seawater. It was like touching an old, waterlogged book. As I helped her towards the rescue basket, another figure stirred. A man, his face gaunt, a scraggly beard encrusted with salt. He wore a heavy fisherman's sweater. His eyes, too, held that unnerving blankness. "The storms," he rasped, his gaze fixed on nothing. "They never cease." We worked quickly, methodically. Jensen, the comms tech, now also serving as our hoist operator, looked white as a sheet, but he kept his focus. We brought them up one by one, 42 people in total, from 3 different ships, each one claiming to be from a vessel lost decades ago. The Adeline, the Mary Celeste II, and the Orion. All of them spoke of recent events: a sudden storm, a rogue wave, a boiler explosion, events that occurred generations ago. Back on the Relentless, the survivors were a macabre spectacle. Dressed in clothes from another era, their skin unnaturally pale, their movements stiff and slow. They didn't shiver, didn't complain about the cold, even as we wrapped them in thermal blankets. They barely spoke, and when they did, it was in hushed, repetitive phrases describing their recent ordeal. Dr. Aris, our medical officer, was beside himself. He'd done initial assessments, checking vitals. Alex, their body temperatures are barely above hypothermic, but they show no signs of frostbite or severe exposure. No significant dehydration either, and their cells, they're like preserved specimens. It's not normal. It's not humanly possible, he was whispering, his eyes wide with a mixture of scientific curiosity and profound dread. Are they zombies, Doc? Asked Petty Officer Davies, one of our engineers who'd come to gawk. Eris glared at him. Don't be an idiot, Davies, but I don't know what they are. They're breathing, their hearts are beating, but it's all so slow, like a clock winding down to a crawl but never quite stopping. We set them up in the main mess hall, under armed guard initially, until it became clear they posed no threat. They just sat staring, sometimes humming an old, forgotten tune, or murmuring to themselves about a long-dead loved one. They didn't eat much, just sipped water, sometimes a clear broth. Their eyes followed us not with malice, but with a deep, unsettling sadness. That night the dreams started. I dreamed of the deep, not just water, but an oppressive, living darkness. It pressed in, silent and heavy, filled with the echoes of drowned screams. I felt cold, a cold that went beyond physical sensation, a chill that seeped into my soul. And then, a whisper, not in my ears, but in my mind, a chorus of voices lamenting, forever falling, pulled down by an unseen hand. Welcome to the darkness, Sonar, welcome to what waits. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart hammering. The ship was silent, save for the rhythmic thrum of the engines. I glanced at my bunkmate, Seaman First Class Rodriguez, who was sleeping soundly. I tried to shake it off, but the feeling of profound unease clung to me like wet seaweed. Over the next few days, the atmosphere on the Relentless shifted. The initial awe and shock gave way to a creeping dread. The survivors, confined to the mess in an adjoining compartment, weren't doing anything overtly threatening, but their presence was a drain. They were like holes in the fabric of reality, sucking the warmth and sanity out of our ship. Petty Officer Jensen, who'd been so eager to join the Coast Guard, became withdrawn. He started mumbling to himself, staring out at the ocean with the same vacant expression as the survivors. I found him one evening, sitting alone in the communications room, just staring at the static on an old radio. Jensen, you okay, pal? I asked, putting a hand on his shoulder. He flinched violently, like I'd shocked him. His eyes were bloodshot. They talked to me, Alex, he whispered, his voice trembling. Not with words, but with feelings, with memories. They show me the deep. They show me what it's like. What's like? I asked, my own fear starting to prickle. To be down there, he breathed, his gaze fixed on something I couldn't see. To feel the pressure, the cold, to watch the light fade, forever, and to know you're not alone. I tried to reassure him, to tell him it was just stress, but even as I spoke the words, they felt hollow. I'd felt it too, the dreams, the whispers. The equipment started to malfunction, not catastrophically, but enough to be unnerving. The radar would glitch, showing ghost ships on the horizon. The sonar pings would return garbled echoes, sometimes sounding like distorted human cries. The lights flickered, power surges that no one could explain. Dr. Aris reported that his medical instruments, when used on the survivors, would often just die, batteries drained in an instant. It's like they're drawing energy, he theorized, his voice now almost constantly frayed. Not consciously, but their very being, their impossible state, it's creating some kind of resonance, and it's affecting us, the ship. Everything, Lieutenant Miller tried to maintain order, but even he looked haggard. He'd taken to drinking black coffee at all hours, his eyes constantly scanning the ship, as if looking for an invisible enemy. He'd put out a priority message to command, requesting immediate transfer of the survivors to a shore facility, explaining the bizarre circumstances. The response was slow, cautious. Command was clearly trying to figure out if Miller had lost his mind. Then things escalated. One night, a scream tore through the ship. It was Davies, the engineer. We found him in the engine room, curled up in a fetal position, rocking back and forth. His eyes were wide with terror, fixed on a dark corner. The water, it was in the pipes, he shrieked, pointing a trembling finger. It was singing, the deep was singing to me. And it wanted to come back. He was incoherent, babbling about the sea having a voice, a pull. We sedated him, but the image of his raw, primal fear stayed with me. The survivors themselves remained largely impassive. But I started to notice a subtle shift. Their eyes, once vacant, now held something else. A spark, a glimmer, and they started to watch us more intently, not with curiosity, but with a strange, possessive hunger. I was on watch trying to focus on the radar screen when I felt a cold breath on my neck. I spun around, nothing, but the feeling lingered, a chill that sank into my very bones. I heard a faint guttural hum coming from the mess hall. I crept closer, peeking through the narrow window of the door. They were all awake, sitting upright. The humming came from them, a low, resonant drone that seemed to vibrate through the deck plates. And then one of them, the woman from the Adeline, the one I'd first pulled from the water, slowly raised her hand. Her fingers, long and delicate, were stained with faint streaks of green, like algae. She pointed at the bulkhead directly above the spot where Jensen usually sat, and there in the faded paint, a single dark stain began to spread. Not a water stain, it was too dark, too viscous. It looked like crude oil, but wrong, somehow alive. It pulsed faintly, expanding like an ink blot on paper, forming a vague, shifting shape that resembled an ancient, barnacled anchor. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. I couldn't scream, I could barely think. This wasn't psychological, this was real. I ran to Miller's cabin, pounding on the door. He opened it, bleary-eyed, a pistol clutched in his hand. The stress had hollowed his face. "Alex." "What in God's name, sir, it's them, something's happening," I stammered, dragging him towards the mess hall. The stain, the humming, he followed me, pistol raised, his face grim. When he saw the mess hall, when he heard the drone, and when he saw the growing, dark stain on the bulkhead, his jaw went slack, his hand trembled. "Dear God," he whispered. That's when the ship started to pitch violently. Not just regular waves, this was a jarring, unnatural shudder, as if something enormous was trying to tear the Relentless apart from below. Alarms blared, lights flickered wildly, casting grotesque shadows. "Report." "What's happening?" Miller roared into the intercom, but only static answered. We were being tossed like a toy boat. I braced myself, my heart a frantic drum. The humming from the mess hall intensified, becoming a deafening roar, a cacophony of voices that seemed to resonate from everywhere at once, from the steel plates, from the air, from my very skull. It was the sound of the deep, a chorus of the drowned, finally finding their voice. The bulkhead stain pulsed faster, growing, changing. The anchor shape twisted, elongating, forming tendrils that snaked across the wall. And the smell, a horrifying stench of brine, decay, and something else, something metallic and sharp, like old blood. Then the survivors began to rise, all 42 of them. Their movements were no longer stiff but fluid, almost graceful, like dancers moving to an unseen conductor. Their eyes, once empty, now glowed with an eerie phosphorescence, reflecting the emergency lights. They were no longer pale. Their skin had taken on a mottled, greenish hue, like kelp. Their hair seemed to lengthen, to undulate. The woman from the Adeline stepped forward, her gaze fixed on Miller, then on me. A slow, chilling smile spread across her face, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too numerous. Greenish light pulsed from within her mouth. "You brought us back," she rasped, her voice no longer dry but moist, dripping with seawater. "But you cannot keep us." Miller, despite his fear, raised his pistol. "Stay back, I'm warning you." She took another step, then another. The other survivors followed, a slow, inexorable wave of reanimated death. The ship groaned, twisting. A loud crack echoed from below deck. "They're not human, Alex," Miller yelled, desperation in his voice. "There's something else," he fired. The gunshot cracked like thunder in the enclosed space. The round struck the woman in the chest. It didn't even faze her. She kept coming, the bullet hole in her chest weeping a viscous, black fluid that smelled of the deep. Her eyes glowed brighter. Miller fired again and again, emptying his clip. Each shot was met with the same indifferent advance. The black fluid oozed from the wounds, swirling and pulsing, seeming to accelerate her movements. Fear, cold and absolute, gripped me. This wasn't a rescue. This was a nightmare given flesh. "Get back, Alex," Miller screamed, throwing his empty pistol at the advancing figures. "Run." I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and fled, the echoing hum of their voices, their slow, deliberate footsteps pursuing me. The ship was in chaos. Crewmen ran screaming, slipping on decks that were now slick with a thin film of seawater that had appeared from nowhere. The smell of decay was overpowering. I ran to the bridge, hoping for some explanation, some escape. But the bridge was deserted, the helm was spinning wildly. The radar screen showed only static, interspersed with grotesque, shifting shapes that were clearly not ordinary ships. A blast rocked the ship, throwing me against the console. I heard tearing metal, the shriek of twisting steel. The Relentless was breaking apart. I scrambled up, gasping, my lungs burning. I looked out the bridge window. The sea outside was no longer just choppy. It was a maelstrom, black and churning with impossibly tall waves, and in the heart of it I saw them. Shapes. Immense, shadowy forms moving beneath the surface. Tentacles, fins, it was too dark, too fast to tell. But they were there, vast and ancient, rising to reclaim their children. Suddenly a hand clamped down on my shoulder. I whirled around, heart pounding. It was Jensen, but not the Jensen I knew. His eyes glowed with the same phosphorescence as the survivors. His skin was mottled green. His uniform was soaked, clinging to his emaciated frame. "Welcome, Alex," he whispered, his voice an eerie echo of the woman's. The deep has sung its song, and we answer. He reached out a hand, his fingers long, wet and green. Barnacles had begun to form on his knuckles. He smelled of salt and a faint, sweet decay. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. Jensen. What have they done to you? He smiled, a slow, horrifying stretching of his lips. They have shown me the only way to truly live, to truly be. He gestured with his barnacled hand towards the churning sea. We are of the water now, we always were. The ship gave another shuddering lurch. The lights went out, plunging the bridge into near darkness, lit only by the faint, eerie glow of Jensen's eyes and the phosphorescence of the waves outside. I knew with chilling certainty that there was no escape. The Coast Guard had sailed into a trap, a maritime grave that had lain dormant for decades, waiting for someone foolish enough to disturb its rest. We hadn't rescued survivors. We had simply opened the door, letting something ancient and hungry return. Jensen stepped closer, his glowing eyes fixed on mine. I could feel the cold radiating from him, the chill of the deep, a preternatural cold that promised endless solitude, endless consciousness. He was extending his hand to me, not to harm, not to fight, but to invite, to welcome me to the endless fall. The deck tilted sharply. I lost my footing, sliding across the wet floor. The roar of the ocean filled my ears. I saw glimpses of other crew members, transformed, joining the ranks of the ancient drowned, their eyes burning green. They were all moving towards the gaping hole that was now tearing the relentless apart. They were returning to the ocean. As I slid, I could feel it calling to me, the same whisper I'd heard in my dreams, now a siren song. The deep, the vast, eternal consciousness that had held these souls, preserved them, and now claimed them anew. And I knew, with a certainty that transcended fear, that it was claiming me too. My skin felt clammy, my vision blurred, and the cold, the terrible, bone-seeping cold began to take hold. Jensen was kneeling beside me, his face close, his eyes burning into mine. His breath, smelling of salt and decay, ghosted across my face. "Don't fight it, Alex," he whispered, his voice resonating with the voices of the lost. "It's time to go home, it's time to join us. The water remembers, and now so will you, forever." The ship gave a final, agonizing groan, splitting apart with a deafening shriek of metal. The ocean surged in, a crushing, icy embrace. I felt myself falling, pulled down into the churning blackness, the cold seeping into every cell, and in the depths I saw them. The vast, shadowy forms, ancient and unknowable, waiting to welcome me to my eternal vigil. My eyes, I knew, were beginning to glow.